Welcome back to NASCAR Lap by Lap with me, Garon Bach. We're going to take a look back at the NASCAR Cup Series weekend at Bristol, look ahead at Rockingham just a little bit from how much information we got from January, and then to cap it all off, we're going to look back at the first 9 races of the season, check out the standings, and figure out who are the drivers that should be able to either regroup, who are the drivers who will stay at the top, or who are the drivers that need to figure it out from the bottom. So, to start off, there will be no guests this weekend, but I'm excited about that as well because I want to be able to spend time on what all happened over the weekend and then what will be happening over this weekend. So, let's get started. The Bristol race definitely was one that will not be memorable, except for maybe if NASCAR takes a different direction from the track. The tire wear did not happen because the weather, it seems that there was a threshold for what the tires would have an issue at. And clearly Kyle Larson figured that out and we saw after about 40, 50 laps that he was once again leading the train that seemed to start at the bottom of the track where the PJ1 was, and he just dominated the rest of the way. So let's take a look at the results here. Starting off, obviously, is Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson spoke about over the weekend that he just wanted to dominate, and that's what he did. He finished second in the Truck Series. He finished first in the Xfinity Series, and then he ended up winning in the Cup Series as well. Now, this isn't a problem with me about him going down to the Xfinity Series, Truck Series. I was on Fans for Racing show Monday night, and we talked about how we all think that it is the perfect mix of drivers being able to go down to the lower series and perform there. It brings in fans, and that's something else I wanted to mention was the fans. Bristol has had its struggles, and Bristol still seems to be in a problem of not being able to bring fans in, and clearly we saw that. But here's something we need to remember is that Bristol is 160,000 people. That's how many people can fit in that arena, that coliseum, as you will. And clearly it's not going to sell out, especially for the spring race, whenever the Bristol night race is the more notorious, more popular one. But overall, Bristol does have its issues. And I originally, before I sat down, took a look at it, I was thinking that it's the tire. This is the tire. It's the tire and the car. Those are my two things. The car has no horsepower, and that the tires, they just had no wear. Goodyear brought the tire. Goodyear brought the tire that was supposed to wear if it was a cold Bristol race, but it was a Bristol race in Northeast Tennessee on a warmer day because it's in April, and the tire just was able to hold on for a lot longer. But on the other hand, back to what Kyle Larson was saying, where he mentioned that he likes to just whoop their butts basically for the lower series to show I am a better driver. And I mean, if you're that good, if you can talk that way and you can walk that way, then you just have to just keep showing it. And Larson also mentioned that he needs to no Larson mentioned that the truck that he raced in had no horsepower, and that it felt nice that in the Xfinity Series the car could pass. It felt nice to him that the car could actually make a move. We saw him get to the back of Allgaier during the Xfinity race, and the fact that Larson was able to move someone out of the way, which happens at your Martinsvilles, your Richmonds, but Bristol, it came to be known as a track that you would see drivers race at, and that you knew there was going to be some beating and banging because that's what Bristol was. But it's not anymore, and fans obviously have realized that. The drivers have realized that, and it's becoming sad to see that over the weekend, the most popular storyline there in the area was over the college's quarterback from Tennessee instead of being worried about the racing. But overall, NASCAR did well television-wise, had over 2 million viewers, especially going up against the Masters. And I believe that even though the race may not be as good, it's still Bristol. And once NASCAR can figure out that Bristol to fans, the casual fans, even those who aren't into racing, but if you ask someone to name a couple tracks, it's typically Daytona, Talladega, and Bristol are the three they can name. And once Bristol can figure that out, I think that it will be a better track and that more fans will be able to enjoy it as well. So, back to the results of the race here. The drivers I enjoyed watching throughout the day were Spire Motorsports. Spire did something that was very odd to me because originally, whenever I had looked at the race weekend and in my preview, I thought Michael McDowell would do well. But clearly, if you look here, I'm going to put it full screen because I understand it can be a little hard to see. Michael McDowell is someone who had almost a top 10 average finish here, or not top 10 average finish, but averaged around 10th place. He finished 30th. But then if you look at Carson Hocevar, he finished 11th. We need to remember here that Hocevar, if it were not for his pit stop that lasted over 20 seconds, he could have been up there racing for, I wouldn't say the win. I don't think anyone was catching Larson, but maybe even Hamlin or Gibbs. I think Hocevar would have finished second or third. And then right below Hocevar and behind Barry was Justin Haley. Justin Haley at the beginning of the race was, I think, the first driver to realize, hey, we can get to the front here because the tires aren't wearing. And we saw him go from the middle of the pack up to second place, and he held his own there. And he did well. He finished, like I mentioned here, he finished up there in 13th. A few of the drivers I was concerned about, though, over the weekend was I thought that maybe the RFK Fords would not do well. I thought that maybe it would just be Chris Buescher who would be able to hold the RFK Fords up there. But if you look here, Chris Buescher had himself another mediocre day at the track. He finished 25th, and that's been a problem of his. Recently, he had ran. I believe he finished in the top 15, but before that, he was finishing top 10, top 5. He even won a race there. And then we look at the rest of RFK Racing, and you have Ryan Preece, who also has been a top driver, finishing 20th. And then you had Brad Keselowski, who for the first time, I think almost this season, at least on tracks like this, Brad Keselowski finished above his other two cars. And Keselowski has not been the best this season. That's something that Keselowski has struggled with, is that he has a team owner. I think he's at a point to where we see that the 6 team knows the 17 and the 60 are the cars to go, and that Keselowski, I think, is more so just, enjoying his time. Clearly, he wants to win. And if you're racing in the sport, you're not going to just ignore the fact that you want to win. And Keselowski, I think, has a team owner, as a driver, clearly has that drive to still want to win. And then finally, I wanted to bring up JGR and Hendrick Motorsports. We see how that went for them. Kyle Larson finished first. Denny Hamlin, Ty Gibbs, Chase Briscoe, second, third, fourth, and then Christopher Bell is there in eighth. JGR has his track figured out. Hendrick Motorsports has his track figured out. The problem now becomes the next gen car is supposed to be an equal playing field for everybody. But now we're at a point to where it's not. And I for one, think that is okay. I think that there is a reason why in every single sports league, you have your top teams, your mid-tier teams, and your low-tier teams. And there is also a reason why whenever we saw Josh Berry win back in Las Vegas, no one seemed to be upset about it because it was Red Brothers Racing. It was a great storyline. But now we see Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson finished in first. No one was happy about it. Denny Hamlin finished in second. It seems to be that another big reason why a lot of fans are upset about how this race went was because of who finished 1-2. Kyle Larson, if you're a fan of Kyle Larson, you're most likely a fan of the Chevys and Hendrick Motorsports. And if you're a fan of Denny Hamlin, you're most likely a fan of the Toyotas and of Joe Gibbs Racing. So overall, I think that we need to start pushing the brakes as a fan base whenever we want to attack NASCAR and go, this is the problem, this is the problem. But the cream's going to rise to the top. The best drivers are going to be the best drivers. The best teams are going to be the best teams. I do not care who you are. I do not care what track you're going to. There's a reason why Hendrick Motorsports has won the Daytona 500 in back-to-back years. There's a reason why Joe Gibbs Racing seems to always do well at Charlotte nowadays. There's a a reason behind it, and it's because the best teams are the best teams, and people and fans need to stop getting upset about seeing the best teams winning because that's just how it is in the sport. Now, obviously, I for one, I love to see one of those small teams winning. Heck, even Trackhouse. I mean, we all remember Trackhouse racing back a couple years ago with Ross Chastain making it to the championship race, and then Daniel Suarez doing well. It seems that Trackhouse racing is also kind of becoming an annoyance to fans, which is odd to say the least, because I think fans are getting upset about the fact that Shane Van Gisbergen could race his way into the playoffs off of a win, even though he has struggled on circuits or on the oval circuits. And that's something I want to get into now is the playoff picture. So obviously NASCAR's playoff picture is always a little odd. It has always been weird. Some fans love it because it adds excitement to those cutoff races, those Bristols. I mean, even at the end of the season, back at Darlington last season and now Daytona, it adds excitement. This is what the fans want. This is what people want to see. And this is what NASCAR's giving them, it seems. But just like Joey Logano last year, he was outside. I believe he was either 14th. He was around 15th, and he won the championship, which to me is not how it should work. Right now, overall, William Byron is winning. He has six top 5 finishes, I believe, 6 top 10 finishes, and 4 of the drivers have those as well. So if you look here, Christopher Bell is the top spot for the playoffs. Obviously, that changes if a William Byron wins the regular season championship, if a Kyle Larson wins. But something I want to hit on here, I just mentioned it earlier, was the fact that Ryan Blaney, that Joey Logano, and that Austin Cindric aren't locked in yet. But the thing I mentioned earlier was Josh Berry winning, which is basically the R&D car for Team Penske. He won. He's locked in. Does that become an issue now to where Penske, you are now 1/4 through the season? You have only 17 races left until the playoffs, and and 3 of your drivers, and not to diss on Cindric. Cindric's not had the best season, but your other 2 drivers, your Logano previous champion, Blaney, the champion 2 years ago, they are struggling. It seems not because that they're struggling of finishing or during the race. I mean, Logano at one point had the most laps led and just hadn't had a win. It took him a while to get a top 10 finish, but he finally did. Ryan Blaney, he dominated at Homestead, and then the engine blew up. He did very well at Darlington. It seemed like he was going to win that race. It seemed like he was going to come back because of the tire wear issues and come and win that race, but he didn't. Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano are not locked into the playoffs right now, and I think this goes back to the dilemma of the playoffs. I want to bring this back up again. If you look here, Ryan Blaney is 7th on points. Joey Logano is 10th. That is very expected for those two. That is what I thought would happen for those two. And I personally think that if you're 7th or 10th, yeah, you should have a shot to be in the championship race. But it's the fact that they've not won. But this is where it comes back to. Joey Logano last season, he won when it mattered. It's the same thing with fans of William Byron right now. Everyone's saying, well, he's leading the points, but he only has 1 win, and Christopher Bell has 3 wins, and Larson has 2 wins, and Hamlin has 2 wins. Well, it's the consistency in the sport. There's a reason why that in this sport, you can win a championship race and not win a single race throughout the year. Think about that. That is insane, by the way, but I think it's neat. It's how the sport's ran, and that's how NASCAR wants to run their sport. And if they're okay with that, then we as fans just have to accept it. We can't complain about it. Obviously, NASCAR has looked at their changes. I mean, even recently, for talking about Rockingham later, NASCAR wants to go there. NASCAR is trying to go to Mexico because they are going to Mexico. They're trying to grow the sport internationally. I believe that NASCAR is putting their toes into way too many pools right now, and that's just not how it's going to work for them. But back to the playoffs here. A few drivers that stand out to me right now is Kyle Busch again. He's there at 16th, plus 2 points of the cut line at the moment. Kyle Busch is someone I thought would get a win early in the season. I thought that RCR would have figured it out by now. Austin Dillon is Austin Dillon. You have to remember, this is someone who's won 2 Crown Jewel races, the Daytona 500 and the Coca-Cola 600. And yet here we are as a fan base still complaining about who's driving the 3 car, still upset about the fact that Austin Dillon seems to still be in the ride. We saw what he did back at Richmond where he wrecked Logano and Hamlin last season. But the other side of that coin is Kyle Busch for Richard Childress Racing. Last week on Fox, during one of the pre-race videos that they show, he talked about how fans cheer for him now. 10 years ago, if you told me people were going to be cheering for Kyle Busch, me included at that point, I grew up a Jimmy Johnson fan, so there's that. But if you told me that 10 years ago people would be cheering for Kyle Busch, I would expect it to be something terrible that happened, like some major comeback story. But no, it's just the fact that he left JGR to go to RCR. And he did well his first season at RCR. But now here we are again. It seems that he's going to be in another one of those battles of can he finish within the top 15, the top 12? Can he manage to average that type of run every single weekend to keep himself above the cutoff line? And I think he will. He's someone at the beginning of the season, said would be in the playoffs. He's someone I expected to be able to make it to the round of 12. So not just make it in and then fall off like how we saw with the 21 last season, but to be able to go in and to perform well in the first couple of races. Now, with the remaining drivers here, I did just the top 21. John Hunter Nemechek in 21st. That makes me pretty happy. Like I said, grew up Jimmy Johnson fan, but I don't let that bias go through here. But it is nice to see Legacy Motor Club have a driver who is contending right now. I understand Daytona is going to help out in the points, but John Hunter Nemechek has put together solid runs, a lot of short track runs, and he puts on the run that you need to just keep yourself near the top half in the points. And that's all that matters, especially right now, because it's going to get to a point to where if you can luck yourself into a win, you're locked in. This is why I mentioned Kyle Busch, is because of the fact that, look right here, Kyle Busch, if a driver below 17th, 18th, below those numbers wins a race, and we're going to Talladega next weekend, remember that, a super speedway next weekend, Daytona is the cutoff race going back to Atlanta. If a driver wins one of those races, they get locked into the playoffs. That's what the bold driver names are. Chase Elliott seems to be in a good spot. If you are in my opinion, if you're through 6th through 12th, you are in a good spot right now at this point in the season. Chase Briscoe with JGR is not in a good spot. But back to what I was talking about with Bristol, these two names. Look at 12th and look at 15th. You have Ross Chastain, 13th and 15th. You have Chris Buescher and Ryan Preece. RFK Fords they clearly are, not seems to be, sorry about that, I'll backtrack on that. They are the second best Ford team in the field right now. And it's not close. It seems to be you've got your Penske, and I will go ahead and throw in the Wood Brothers car in there because, it's the same shop. You just on the same team. And then below there, you've got RFK. But those two drivers are in a bad spot. And you have to remember right now, there's that lawsuit going on between Legacy Motor Club and Rickware Racing. And that's where the 60 charter is right now. I don't know if something will happen with that, but let's say if Preece underperforms on the second quarter of the season and he starts to slip, or if Chris Buescher, which I don't think will happen with Buescher, he's shown that he is a very consistent driver. But if Chris Buescher starts to fall off here, what's going to happen with RFK? They have not put on the best record in the past couple of seasons. And when you bring in a third team, that's you saying we're here to compete and we're growing our team. So I don't know if that means that they're going to lose a charter. I have no idea what that's going to mean at all. I hate the charter system, but that's just the world we live in. And that's also the reason why I have to talk about the playoff picture and the fact that Cody Ware could come up and win a race somehow if he managed to. I don't know how that would happen, but I digress. But Hendrick Motorsports and Joe Gibbs Racing, those are, as of right now, the two teams that are going to win the championship if you had to pick one. So there's a good bet because I don't have any bets this weekend, but if you just want to do a championship bet of one of those 8 drivers, pick one. Go right ahead. It'll probably be worth something. But now I'm going to turn over to Rockingham. Rockingham, the last time it was racing the Cup Series, which for most of my life is what I had watched until finally I realized that, hey, the Xfinity Series can put on a great show. Truck Series can put on a great show. Sorry, I was blinded. I'm sorry. But in all seriousness, Rockingham has not been raced since 2004. And I was less than a year old, I believe, the last time they raced there. So I'm excited to see a race weekend there, not just the truck series going like they did about 12 years ago, 2012, 2013. I'm excited to see a race weekend. And with it being Easter weekend, they have Sunday off for everybody. I believe that it is a good reason to have this race. So I don't know who is going to win. I tried my best to look around for who has the best average finish on mile tracks. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say the drivers that back in January did well. So I'll go ahead and talk about the truck series. The best average finish, well, not the best average finish, sorry, that's what I'm so used to saying. But the entry list only has 3 drivers that have raced at this. Has only 4 drivers that have raced at Rockingham: Matt Crafton, Norm Benning, Grant Enfinger, and Parker Kligerman. Those 4 drivers are the only ones to have raced there. I know Bob Pockris made a tweet saying that the entry list for drivers who had previously been there was short, and it was just kind of comical because of NASCAR doesn't do this necessarily that much to where there's like only a generation gap of 20 years. But what I am excited for is what we saw back in January to play out this weekend because of what the times were during the practice. Corey Heim shared that it seems like the difference between lap times are all pretty close within the top 20-ish. So, and that's 20 seconds. So I think everyone kind of expected it to be one groove, which is an issue with a lot of NASCAR races right now, is that it's a one groove style track. The only track that seems to do well, the only style of tracks that seem to do well with multiple grooves are your mile and a halves. But to finish the quote, he said, but it seems to be moving up a little bit in turns 1 and 2 already, which is promising. And that's something exciting because I want to see multi-groove racing this weekend. Everybody wants to see it, especially after what happened with Bristol. And I believe when you go Bristol to Rockingham, one, it makes me think of, the 2000s, the peak of NASCAR. It makes me think of those times, which nostalgic-wise is great. But a worry many teams had was, are they going to go back to Rockingham, which had been freshly repaved a couple of years ago? Is NASCAR going to go back here and just put on a rotten egg of a performance? And I don't think they will. The drivers, the biggest thing they talked about coming out in January was the speed. They said that the track was fast. And just to put it into perspective for you guys here, the lap that was the fastest lap turned was by Tricon Garage's Gio Ruggiero. I believe that's how you pronounce it, and I apologize if I butchered that. But his lap was 21.888 seconds, an average speed of 167.27 miles per hour. Here's the thing. That lap is about 20 miles per hour faster than what the Truck Series had put down the last time they were there, 20 miles per hour, and was, I believe, a handful of miles per hour faster than the Cup car back then in 2004. That is something that I like to see, is the fact that the track got faster. I understand that is, for myself, I cover mostly just the Cup Series. And with the next gen car, the tracks have gotten slower. You saw Talladega, the 4 wide fuel saving. We saw Daytona, the 3 wide fuel saving. The tracks have gotten slower because the drivers and the teams have made them slower. But whenever you do a repave of a mile track, you bring in the nostalgia factor of it. For any driver that grew up, which for most every driver in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, when they grew up, they were huge NASCAR fans. And to say, yeah, we're racing at Rockingham this weekend, the Rock, it's a cornerstone of the Cup Series in North Carolina, of NASCAR in North Carolina, and in NASCAR in general. And I think it's nice to see that drivers are excited because of the speed. They're not complaining about, well, the track seems too fast, the track seems too dangerous. No, I'm sorry, but you're driving a race car. These things are meant to go fast and they are meant to be dangerous. But now onto the Xfinity side of things. The most exciting thing I'm looking forward to is that, one, the race is sold out. The race is sold out for the Xfinity Series, which the Xfinity Series has done very well on television, on the CW, at least whenever the market will actually air the race, which is something that's been an issue, which I hope NASCAR figures out. And the fact that fans are going compared to what happened at Bristol, where if you looked, at least on television, whenever they did the wide shot, Bristol was empty. And whenever I went there last spring with me and my girlfriend, it was just us two. The track seemed to feel empty unless you're sitting right on the front stretch. And I'm glad to hear that Rockingham, an old track, is going to have sold out stands. And then another thing is that Casey Kane is back. Casey Kane is going to be trying to make the race, and it'll be his first time racing in a NASCAR car since 2018. I loved Casey Kane growing up. Casey Kane was such a cool driver. It seems like he never ages, and I'm happy to see him back on the track. Casey Kane being in any series will always bring in viewers. I believe because of the need for fans such as me on Saturday, that because there will be no race on Sunday, on Saturday, I'll be tuned in and I will be for the storyline of it. Most of the things I cheer for is storyline. I will be completely honest because it helps the views. Thank you guys. But I believe that Casey Kane, if he can put on a good showing, that it will bring more fans, even more fans to the Xfinity Series. I think that a lot of eyes being on the Xfinity Series this weekend is a good thing and a very valuable thing. And then the driver that put down the fastest lap and the Xfinity Series side of the testing back in January was Corey Day. He had a 22.450 second time, which is kind of weird. The fact that the Truck Series seems to be the fastest vehicle, and the fastest race will most likely be on Friday. But overall, Rockingham weekend should be great. I'm very excited for it. I think it will be a great addition to the NASCAR Cup Series, which is something NASCAR has talked about, is that they're eyeing a return there. I think that if they can get it done, they can get it done. If they can go to North Wilkesboro, if they can go to Bowman Gray, they can easily go to Rockingham. And I'll go ahead and close it off with that. I thank you guys for joining me. I am sorry that I didn't have a guest this weekend, but it did give me enough time to break down everything I wanted to. And I thank you guys again so much for joining. And we will be back here again to preview Talladega next Wednesday at 6 o'clock here on the Bleacher Brother Network. Thank you guys so much.